pop star Barry Manilow, who sang in the 1970s, Looks Like We Made It. Well, it's Friday, capping the first week of the Sportsline podcast here on CHCH. Thanks so much for the positive feedback I've received. It certainly motivates us to keep working hard. And folks, if you do like what you're seeing, let us know in the comment section. Like, subscribe, and share. Well, I met this individual during the Hamilton Bulldogs Calder Cup run in 2007. Now, although we see the world from different perspectives due to the fact that he's a massive 6'4", we tend to see the sports world from the same place. What I do know for sure, whether he's writing for the Hamilton Spectator, talking on CHML radio, or appearing on the old Off the Record show on TSN, Mr. Scott Radley has opinions. Scott, pleasure to have you here on the set on the Sportsline podcast. It's great to see you.
Thank you. And we're quoting Barry Manilow as Make It After All. Instead of Mary Tyler Moore, we're going to make it after all. I see. I didn't know which way you were going to go with that.
You know what? I never thought about that. But I don't really feel a lot like Mary Tyler Moore.
Well, I guess that makes some sense. But do you feel a lot like Barry Manilow?
No. Maybe with all the plastic work. Have you seen him recently? It's got a lot of plastic.
And you do too?
Yeah? No.
You do too? This is not the original Bubba look?
No, they say black don't crack. Partner, tell me about, we know you from really multimedia sources. It's turned in that way, I think, in our career right now. But you did start out as a writer, and I think I need to know what was the beginnings of the writing craft for you and why you fell in love with it.
I'm shocked, by the way, with your intro that we only met in 2007 during that Calder Cup run, but we'll get to that. Got into journalism because back in high school, we took this, maybe you did too, you took this questionnaire to find out what you wanted to do with your life. And filled out all these millions of questions and sent it in. And back then, I hate to say how old we are, but back then you probably put it into a punch computer or something and paid $50, and it came back weeks later. And I was told that based on my answers and my personality and everything else, I should either be an airline steward or a mortician. True story. And I was like, well, I'm not really fond of handling dead bodies. And I get airsick at times. So I was like, okay, what's plan C? Mm-hmm. And, well, let's just say high school marks, I wasn't going into medical school, and I wasn't following my dad into law, so it was phys ed teacher or journalist. Mm-hmm. And somehow got into Ryerson for journalism, what was Ryerson, and loved it, like right away loved it, and said, okay, somehow I found the thing that I love to do, because I did not love school. I did not love school, but I love that.
And you had a bit of an athletic background too, as well, too.
Oh, I was massively athletic. I used to play, I was a rep hockey goalie, the safest goalie in hockey because the puck never hit me. And I tinkered. I played everything and I loved it, but I wasn't going anywhere with it. So, no, I as I say, I had always wanted to go into sports. Back from the days, I grew up in Toronto, and back when I was delivering the Globe and Mail, you get up at 5 a.m. to do a Globe and Mail route. And before I would leave, I'd be at the end of the street, a pile of papers that had been dropped off, and I'd whip one open and just read the whole sports section before I even got started. Like, I loved the idea. It took a while to get there. I was doing news, which was great, doing news first, but then, I got into sports, and it's gone from there.
It's interesting. You've developed your skills into the point where you're not just a reporter, you're technically a columnist, right? And that's a special kind of writer that also not just reports on stuff and the daily stuff and does feature articles, but you also, toss in your opinions. And sometimes, as we see in the newspaper world, I'm going to say, God bless his soul, because I think he's an outstanding writer, and I know you do too, Steve Simmons.
Yep.
You write to elicit opinions. And sometimes people get upset with you on that.
Really? I hadn't noticed. I've never had angry comments.
Well, and how do you handle that type of criticism?
Well, I handle it by understanding that I'm not writing something that I don't believe in just to needle people. I'm writing what I actually think. And so if I believe that, then I can defend it outwardly and inwardly. If I was just writing something that was only designed to rankle people, and we, like, as an exercise, when Steve Milton was with the paper, we did this a couple times where we would do the, he would take one side and it's like, fine, I'll write the other. And I didn't necessarily believe that wholeheartedly, but it was a pro and con. One that I always remember was back in the later days of Pat Quinn's tenure as Leaf coach. Things were not going well. The Leafs had begun to fall off. And there was a lot of talk about whether Pat Quinn should be fired. And so, Hamilton guy, so we decided, Steve and I, that he would do the, no, Pat Quinn should not be fired. And I wrote the Pat Quinn should be fired. And it was one of the times that I didn't really think it, but it was like, oh, I can make the argument. And so I wrote it. And then about a week later, I think it was at a Bulldogs game, I can't remember where it was, I bumped into Pat Quinn's mom. and she let me know that she did not agree. And that was one time I was like, well, I can't tell her I don't really think this. But I'm trying to think, what do you say when, and I get it. I mean, I certainly understand it. If someone had said that about one of my kids, I would feel the same. But no, 99% of the time I'm writing what I think or what I believe. And so that's, people want to scream and yell, and they do. They're entitled to their opinion too.
And I think we're in a society right now, and we're seeing this in television a lot of times in sports television. People call it hot takes or whatever you want to call it. But I think that water cooler conversation is a very important part of media right now for sports. It is.
To a point. I think that there's a lot of noise. And I think that there are, and this is going to sound possibly a little self-congratulatory, it's really not meant that way. I like to think that you and I have been doing this long enough that maybe we have some credibility. I think there's a lot of people who say stuff just to try and get attention.
That's true.
And try to find a niche or try to get clicks or whatever else, and they are ludicrous. Not the people, the comments. And look, I will 100% always support. If you believe it and you want to say it, knock yourself out. As I say, everyone's entitled to their opinion. But I'm not a fan of I'm just going to find the most insane thing I can possibly say just so people will click on it and people will make comments about it. That stuff drives me nuts.
And all you got to do is go to Twitter. Right?
Any social media.
Yeah. I feel like Twitter's the worst, though. Like, it's just, and I think because it's short, right? Like, you got to get your point out pretty quick. But people are, I think you said a good word, too, credibility. Like, we're in a social media world where anyone can say anything now.
Credibility is not agreeing with someone all the time. Right? Credibility is that you've done this for a long time and you've shown that you are credible as far as your information is good. It doesn't mean you are going to agree with the person. You could disagree with them. There are columnists I disagree with on basically every single issue. And I know, because I hear it, there are people who disagree with me on every single issue. That's not it. It's the stuff where, as I say, it's just to try and get clicks or whatever. And the other thing about Twitter that I do struggle with is, you and I are talking now. So let's say that I made a joke to you. You can tell from the inflection in my voice that I'm making a funny, or you could tell that I'm being dead serious and I'm firing a barb at you. On Twitter, you don't get any inflection. So there are times when someone says something that's clearly a joke, but you don't get that. Or it's clearly a dig, but it could sound like that's part of the reason too why it's such a dangerous place to hang out for too often, for too long, because you don't always know. Words can mean two different things depending on how they are expressed verbally.
Email, you can get that in email as well too. Sometimes I don't know how to take someone's
100%
comment, 100%. Right? I mean, but yet we're in this world right now where you've got to use Twitter, you've got to use email. Like this social media is for real. It's out there. You've also translated your skills from writing into radio as well too, and very much like what we're talking about, where you're talking now for a living and also eliciting opinions to get people to call as well too. How's that adjustment been for you? You've been doing it for some time now.
Yeah, I'll tell you what. People sometimes say, "What do you prefer?" And I love them both. The difference, I always say this: the difference is it's all in editing. When you're writing, you can go back and reread, and you can fix things that don't quite work exactly right. Now, the other flip side of that is it's there forever. You better get it right because it's online or it's in the paper, and you can't say, "Oh no, I didn't say that." Radio, it's here and gone, but there's no chance to edit. And what comes out of your mouth, and you get the same thing on TV. Anybody does. You may not even mean to say something, or not the way you mean to say it. The intent may not be that, but once it's out there, and I'll tell you a funny story. So this is totally unserious, but
unserious.
Well, no, it's one that didn't get me in trouble mostly. On the radio show, there used to be this thing in Hamilton until the pandemic. There was a thing called Novemberger. And Novemberger, all different restaurants in the city.
You had me in for one of these.
All right. Made gourmet hamburgers, special ones, and it was a fundraiser. And so at the beginning of Novemberger, for about 4 or 5 years in a row, we would have 9 or 10 of these restaurants bring in their creation into the radio show, and on the air, we'd be sampling and talking about this. Well, I was sampling one, had a mouthful of a hamburger from a restaurant in town, and I got to be careful even how I say it now, called the Pheasant Plucker. Well, I had a mouthful of hamburger, and it didn't come out as the Pheasant Plucker. It came out as something far, far different. Now, that didn't really, everyone understood what was going on, but that's like a very simple example. You're not trying to say it, but it can just, boom, it's out there. And then even if you go, oh, I didn't mean that, and we've seen, thankfully, touch veneer, not yet for me, but we've seen people, you've seen people who have said things that a word pops out, you don't know where it came from. I don't think they were bad people. I don't think they were hateful people, but somewhere a wrong word emerged, and that's the end of them.
Yeah.
That's the end of them. Was it the Cincinnati Reds broadcaster anywhere recently?
Yes.
And was trying to say something about the old baseball Negro League, and the wrong word came out. I don't know where it came from. I don't know why.
Brenneman.
That's the end. That's the end. So that's the tricky part of broadcasting, is that you have to be monitoring every move of your tongue before it comes out, because any second can be the last.
Well, and the funny thing in that kind of situation too is half the people understand what he is saying, and then the other half don't. And of course, it's that other half that are calling the bosses and making noise on social media, and where your bosses and your company sometimes have to make moves.
And there have even been cases where there have been questions about what the word was. Not did he actually, or she, did they actually say that? It kind of sounds like it, but it's not really clear from the context. Was that a mispronunciation? Was it something? It's such a, as I say, you've got to be careful, because it's a perilous place. If you make one of those mistakes, it's a peril. Now, there are people, it's not a mistake.
Right.
There are people that are just
sure.
But there are people who, as I say, they've been long time broadcasters, and that just ends them. So it's I love doing it, but you do walk carefully.
And with this radio gig of yours, I mean, and this is a sports podcast, obviously, but I mean, I like to expand on everything. You've now expanded your horizons into not just sports chat, and there's some local politics, and I guess that get people real fired up as well.
Yes. People love talking about City Hall. People love talking about City Hall because what impacts them? Their taxes, the stop sign at the end of their street, their neighbors who don't cut their grass, or whatever. So yeah, it's there's no shortage of stuff to get to. But it started with sports. Way before this show, there was something called the Sports Lounge that we did for a while.
That's long time.
Long time
That's
ago.
right. And it's funny. Just a couple of weeks ago, we ran into one of the biggest shockers we've seen in some time. We are of the age group where we have either read several magazines or subscribed for many years to Sports Illustrated.
Yes.
Seen as the dean of sports journalism.
Yeah.
That no longer exists. I never thought that would. And think about all the magazines that have gone through, the ESPN magazine, the Sport magazine, which is a favorite of mine when I was a kid.
Yeah.
The pictures were great.
The Year in Sport was always,
amazing, right? I always believed that Sports Illustrated would stand. It would stand the test of time. It's no longer here.
Do you remember what your first cover of your first Sports Illustrated was that you ever bought?
It was probably in the mid-'80s, and I believe it was one with Vladimir Guerrero Jr., a senior, on the cover as a Montreal Expo way back.
All right. Back before I had ever seen him, and I thought, oh, they got a Russian guy for their team. The first time I ever heard Vladimir Guerrero, I thought, oh, they got a Russian guy, Vladimir. No. I remember the very first one I got. I was in the hospital for an operation, nothing serious, and my dad had brought me one in, and it had Ronaldo Nehemiah.
Oh, wow.
Joining the San Francisco 49ers.
Right. Track star.
Hurdler joining the 49ers. And I think I had a subscription from that day forward up until a few years ago.
Yep.
But, yeah, it was the best writing. It was the coolest stuff if you could get in there. I was published in Sports Illustrated once upon a time. Yeah. Well, letter to the editor.
Fine. Got in.
It was in university, and it was after the Ben Johnson Olympics. I wrote a letter about Ben Johnson, and it got published in Sports Illustrated. And on one resume that I sent out one time, I had, where have you been published? Sports Illustrated. And they said, really? And I said, well, letter to the editor. Thankfully, they thought it was funny.
It was, but you got in there. Someone thought enough of it, or thought it was thought-provoking enough to put it in that fine magazine.
But Sports Illustrated, it drove what was the important things in sports. If you were on the cover of Sports Illustrated, that was the biggest thing in sports.
Sure.
And
you might as well have been on the Wheaties box.
Bigger. I would argue it was bigger. I would argue it was bigger. But yeah, it was the place. Every week you would just wait for that magazine to arrive. And, even now I can think of a bunch of articles that you look back on and you would never copy what they did. Mm-hmm. But a few times you're like, oh man, I wish I'd thought of that. And one of them, I can't remember who the athlete was. It might have been Charles Barkley, but I can't remember. Or no, it was Dennis Rodman, I think.
Okay.
I can't remember. Anyway, don't know who the writer was. He had the whole article. It was 3 pages long, I guess. Whoever the athlete was, he had asked him a question and set the tape recorder, and the athlete talked for like 12 minutes on that. The writer just transcribed
the whole answer,
and that was his magazine article for the episode. And it was like, well, that's stupid. And you read it and you go, no, that's brilliant. Mm-hmm. It was this rambling mind of this guy who went here and went there, and it was great. But yeah, there has been, I don't think, anything comparable, and it's such a shame that it's no longer around.
Is journalism dead?
No, journalism's not dead. But this week was I think it was the Globe. I know the Globe wrote it. I don't know if it broke it, but the Globe and Mail had the piece about the story from London that 5 members of the Team Canada World Junior 2018 team were being asked to surrender to police. Mm-hmm. And if you looked online and on the comments, a number of people, and I was so disappointed because a couple of them were in the media business, were saying, Globe and Mail, you need to lift the paywall for this because you have to pay to get the article. You need to lift the paywall for this so people can see this. And this, when you say is journalism dead, I don't believe for a second it's dead, but somehow many people now believe it should be for free. You have to pay for people to work at the Globe and Mail, to dig up this stuff, to build relationships, to build contacts, to be able to get this stuff. I don't remember anybody calling up Netflix and saying, why am I paying for Netflix? I should be allowed to stream it for free. Mm-hmm. I don't remember anybody going to the steakhouse and saying, yeah, thanks for my meal, but eating is a human right. I should be able to eat for free. It's a business. Yep. The problem is not that journalism is dead. It's that a lot of people have decided that they don't want to pay for it, and that ultimately won't kill it, but will seriously weaken it over time.
Well, over the years, I mean, going back into our childhood, you had to pay for the newspaper.
And to pay, you pay for any service.
Sure, this is CHCH. I mean,
right? And people say, well, no, you don't pay for CHCH. Well, there's advertising that pays, but you also pay for your cable bills, whatever else. So, yeah, I mean, these things it's such a difficult topic because it sounds like, like people are saying, well, there's nothing there. Well, until there is, and then you say, well, I want it for free. So no, journalism is not that. There are great journalists out there. There are great journalists at the Hamilton Spectator. There's great journalists here. There's great journalists at papers all over the place. Mm-hmm. It's just, do we have a society that decides they want to? The problem is going to be when or if that eventually leads to a place where there are no papers or are far fewer journalists. It's not just a story about 5 former junior hockey players. Mm-hmm. Who's watching City Hall and their decisions? Who's watching the House of Commons and their decisions? Who's calling people in power on what they're doing and keeping them honest? And that, to me, is part of the big reason why. I mean, I believe in journalism, but it's, we'll see. We'll see. You don't know what you got till it's gone, right?
Well, we've experienced so much change in the radio business, so much change in print, so much change in television here. I mean, for the reason that we're doing a podcast here, right? This would have never gone. This would have never flew 5 years ago, I think, maybe on television. But here we are. Here I am. My career has changed in a sense where I'm doing this on a daily basis. And I like it because it's an opportunity to communicate in different ways with people like yourself. But it's changing.
But you know what? 5 minutes ago we talked, or 10 minutes ago we talked about credibility. There are 27 trillion podcasts that exist. Mm-hmm. Why is anyone going to tune into Sportsline podcast with you? Because they know you have credibility, they know you from CHCH. Mm-hmm. That is the kind of thing that makes it stand out, that it'll be different from, good for him, but little Bobby in his basement who does, those are fine. There are some of the great ones that are like that, but it's different.
You're right. Well, thanks for that. I appreciate that. Let's talk some sports. And I know this is close to your heart because you have followed them from day one. And I have been inundated by questions on social media, even personally. Bubba, are the Bulldogs coming back? Scott, are the Brantford Bulldogs coming back to Hamilton?
You catch yourself with that too, do you?
I did, all the time.
All the time. I still do it. And I think we might want to get used to changing that because I am now at the point where I don't think they will. This week, the city of Brantford voted on a proposal to move further down the path towards building a new $100 million arena. The games there are full. The fans are excited. The biggest thing, quite honestly, if I'm Michael Andlauer, and I've talked to Michael about this, although he hasn't given me an answer on this, so I don't have any kind of inside scoop on what's going to happen. If I'm Michael Andlauer, I've now got the Ottawa Senators. That's a handful right now. His passion project is the Bulldogs, but he's got a trucking company, he's got other businesses, and he's got the Senators. The one thing he doesn't need is a bunch of headaches with his junior team. So if you've got a team that you can put into a city where the place is going to be full, there's tickets are going to sell, and the people in that city who run that city are thrilled to have you here and falling over themselves to make sure that we got it covered. You don't have to. We're not going to fight with you about leases or about this or that or the other. I think the idea that I can just have it there and it operates is a beautiful thing for him. In Hamilton, he's been the owner. You talked right off the very top in the intro about how we met in the 2007 Calder Cup Finals. He became owner of the Bulldogs, part owner. He was brought in by Ron Foxcroft and Tony Battaglia and others back in 2003 or 4. In all those years, he never got that kind of support from the city of Hamilton. Never. Never. There were fights about building arenas. The arena was falling apart. One year on opening day, I went to First Ontario Centre, and all 3 escalators were broken. So you got opening night and nothing is working, and they've got construction on an elevator that's blocking half the concourse. It has been really. It has not gone smoothly. So if I'm him and they're going to build a new arena, a new modern arena, and it's going to mean that my concerns about the Bulldogs are taken away, I know what I would do if I was the owner. What about you?
You can't blame him.
I can't blame him at all.
For everything you've said. And I know you in particular, myself, have gotten to know Mr. Andlauer, and he's a guy that wanted nothing best for the city of Hamilton.
Yeah.
And I think that
team is in Brantford now. Yeah. He's still supporting the breakfast programs here in the city of Hamilton. He could have that feeds thousands of kids in disadvantaged parts of town. The first thing that a lot of people would have done if the team moved was say, "Okay, that's it." No, so I don't think that he owes the city of Hamilton anything at this point. I don't. I think that a lot of the people who make a lot of the decisions in this city haven't really shown, it hasn't been reciprocated to him. I can't tell you over the years, and I've been to a lot of Bulldogs games, I can't tell you the last time off the top of my head that I saw an elected official from Hamilton at a game.
Wow.
And 7 of the 11, I think, Brantford councillors have season tickets and are there all the time. Mm-hmm. I can tell you, it's not the answer people here want, but I can tell you if I was the owner where I'd be going.
And it kind of coincides, and I know we've discussed this in the past with the CEBL. And I just did this this week about the release of the CEBL schedule, and that we don't have a Hamilton Honey Badgers, a team that won a championship. Mm-hmm. They are now residing in Brantford, and talking to some of the officials, Brampton, sorry, yep. And in talking to some of the officials there, how happy they are to be where they are at the CAA Center, saying the same sort of alignment that I never saw anyone from the city of Hamilton, in terms of an official, at games coming to talk to us.
Jason Farr
did the announcing.
That's right, and he was a counselor at the time. But yes,
but other people, or even the mayor at the time, or whatever, coming to what do you need? And from the second they landed in Brampton, everyone, what do you need? What can we make your experience better? Do we need to make any adjustments to the arena? What can we do to make your franchise happy and successful? And for that reason, you got I'd like to have a President Mike Morreale that says that team's staying there.
So my question has become, and a lot of people have asked me this, and you've probably had the exact same question, is when the First Ontario Centre renovation is done, will there be any sports teams in there? And there will be the Rock, the Toronto Rock, mm-hmm. the Hamilton Rock, I'll still call them. But other than that, like the idea of a hockey team, I don't know where a hockey team is coming from that's going to get into that arena. Basketball, I don't know. I don't know if Morreale would bring a team back here, but I simply don't know which hockey team. The AHL now, every AHL team is a farm team of an NHL team. Mm-hmm. And for all kinds of reasons that are way too complex to get into right now to do a salary cap, they have all moved their farm teams as close to the NHL city as possible.
Sure.
So
it only makes sense, economic sense.
It makes all kinds of sense. So who then is close here? Well, you could have the Leafs, but they're playing out of Coca-Cola Arena in Toronto in a building that MLSE manages. So it doesn't make a whole lot of sense they're going to leave there. Buffalo is in Rochester, but do you want to, and that's a historic franchise.
It's a legacy team.
Do you want to make it so you have to now cross the border? It's a lot simpler not to have to do that now. Somebody suggested to me, well, what about the Belleville Bulls? Because that's Ottawa's farm team. I'm not sure that Michael Andlauer has the stomach to pull a second team out of Belleville and move it to Hamilton to do that twice. And again, it's further away. Mm-hmm. So I don't see the AHL coming here. The OHL, if the Brantford Bulldogs stay in Brantford, Michael Andlauer owns the geographic rights. It's a 50-kilometer, I think, Is he going to want to put a second team here and potentially, especially if he's got a bigger new arena and needs to sell more tickets? I don't know. What are we going to bring? East Coast ECHL?
Come on, that's not going to work.
That wouldn't work. So the only other option then is the Professional Women's Hockey League, excuse me, which is an interesting idea, but the biggest concern that you would have if you're in the PWHL right now, I think, and if you're a supporter of it, is expansion that is too rapid.
Exactly.
Leagues, even the NHL, that expanded too rapidly back in the 60s and 70s and then 80s, and it watered it down and made the product not good. Build a great product of your 6 teams, or maybe 7 or 8.
Yep.
And and even with that, I don't see them. Could they draw as many as the Bulldogs did every game?
But here's the thing, and I think it goes back to the old Montreal Alouettes theory to me. When they moved from the Big O to McGill Stadium, it looked different. It felt different. It was an atmosphere. And I appreciate that the PWHL have chosen the proper rinks for these teams to play in, where every time, because I think this league is off to a great start, and I think it's going to last. It looks good. It feels good. There's atmosphere. There's people screaming in the stands. You bring them, from what I'm told, and you would probably know better, that this new Cops Coliseum, or whatever we're going to call it, it's a full-size stadium.
Yes. So if you're the PWHL and you do decide you're going to expand, and I don't think the people behind it are not stupid. I don't think they're going to say, our best move right now is going into 18,000 seat arenas today. Maybe that's somewhere down the road. But today, look, they're at the Mattamy Center, Maple Leaf Gardens, which is 2,500, and then you're sold out every game. If there was going to be an expansion, and there was a brand new, say, 5,500 seat arena in Brantford, or 18,000 in Hamilton, which one makes more sense?
Exactly.
And if the PWHL in any way finds itself aligned with the NHL, which has always been the thought that, remember Gary Bettman said a long time ago, get one women's league and then we will...
I think it's going to happen by next year.
So let's start putting pieces together. If Michael Andlauer, if his junior team is in Brantford, if they build a new arena, if the NHL aligns with the PWHL and Michael Andlauer is now an owner in the NHL, I think it's a better chance that a PWHL team comes to Hamilton or goes into his arena in Brantford. I don't know anything about this. I don't know that they're going to do any expansion, but it would seem to me to make a lot more sense. So back to the question, is there going to be a hockey team in Hamilton at that arena? Maybe, but I don't know where it's coming from.
You are because of the retirement of Steve Milton.
Yes,
many moons. One of your great friends and beyond, a colleague. I'm sure you guys have spent many great moments.
You should see him dance.
I'm sure they think about Milty, that ultimate Uncle Milty.
Picture Mick Jagger and Jiminy Cricket melded into one dancing machine.
No, I don't want to picture that. I don't. Milty's a good fellow.
He's a great guy.
But he's moving on, and now you've been tasked with the assignment of covering the Hamilton Tiger Cats. And I know you've kind of been there a little bit for some events. I remember, not to stir the pot, but I remember an article and a time with the Tiger Cats where things weren't going so well, and where you amazingly collaborated the statistics and win-loss records of football teams all over North America. And the Tiger Cats were near the bottom. Maybe they were their bottom. And
there was a time.
And I don't, and maybe people in Tiger Cats land weren't happy with you. But now you're going to be there every day covering the team. Are you excited about this?
Yeah, I'm hoping that sitting in this seat, that some osmosis from, because Orlando Steinauer was sitting right here yesterday. Go back and watch that podcast. So yeah, I'm hoping that some of that. No, it's yes, it will be exciting. I feel almost like Murphy's Law dictates that Steve, who's a Hall of Fame, Canadian Football Hall of Fame media member, having covered the team forever, I kind of feel like it's Murphy's Law that the first year he's not covering the team, they'll win the Grey Cup. I kind of feel like it would almost.
Oh,
Although I think that if that were to happen, if they were to get to the Grey Cup game, I think I would probably extend an olive branch. It's not even an olive branch. We're not fighting, but extend an invitation to Steve and say, "Here, come back and write the Grey Cup game for the." No, I'm looking forward to it. I think it's unfortunate that with 2 chances to win the Grey Cup at home, 2 out of the last 3 years, that didn't work out. I mean, just wrote something this week about the anguish if you are a Southern Ontario sports fan. Because there are people who are fans of the Leafs, of the Jays, of the Ticats, and of the Buffalo Bills. And if you put those 4 together, it's almost a horrendously painful existence you have, because each of those teams finds ways. We saw what happened with the Bills this week. The Leafs do it to you every time. The Jays, whether it's pulling your starter in a game where he's humming along or teasing everyone with Shohei Ohtani or whatever. But you think back to the 2021 Grey Cup, where a pass is in the end zone with 6 seconds left that can be caught, and they end their streak.
yeah.
And it's dropped. It was tipped, I understand, but it was dropped. So this
Could have been caught.
This year will be the 25th anniversary of the last Grey Cup team.
Hard to believe.
Look, I don't want to start off covering the Ticats by dumping on them, and it's not dumping, but in an 8 sometimes and now 9 team league, statistically, the chances that you haven't won a Grey Cup in 25 years is statistically almost impossible. Somewhere along the way, something has to go. But again, the anguish. Brandon Banks running a punt back for a touchdown that gets called back on a flag.
Keep throwing daggers.
So for this reason, I'm not trying to throw the daggers. For this reason, it's like, okay, for the people around here who support those 4 teams, who suffer deeply, let's have something good. Let's have a Grey Cup win this year. I'm hoping they will, because even in Chicago, Chicago Cubs waited 108 years, which I didn't realize, by the way, totally off track. I didn't realize the absolute poetry of that number, 108 years. Do you know the poetry of 100? Do you know how many seams there are? How many stitches on a baseball?
Come on.
108.
Wow.
So the Cubs wait 108 years. But at least they had the Bulls all those years with Michael Jordan.
That's true.
Yes, we've had the Bulldogs.
Stanley Cups, 3 of them.
The Blackhawks. Yes, the Raptors won. Not taking that away. We've had the Bulldogs win championships. But again, if you are a fan of those 4 teams, my goodness, it is time for the Leafs. I'm sorry, the Leafs. I have come to the realization that I was born months after the Leafs won their last Stanley Cup. I have not been alive to see the Leafs even get to a final. Do you realize that the Toronto Maple Leafs, in their entire history, have never won more than 2 playoff series in any one year? Because back in '67, you only had two rounds. They have never won more than 2 rounds. I've come to the conclusion I'm never going to see that. No. But the Ticats, yes, we can see that, and we will.
Well, and let's get out on this one here. This is the last one I'll throw to you. And it's kind of along the same line as a championship and something that is painful for a lot of people.
Uh-oh.
And I know this one hurts you too as well. Because I know you're a big baseball guy.
Yeah.
You've coached baseball. You've written about baseball as well too. Blue Jays or Maple Leafs? Who has a better chance of winning a title? Look at your face. So I know you love the current leadership of the Blue Jays.
Well, I would have said the Blue Jays, and I probably will say the Blue Jays, because I don't believe that the Leafs can win. I'm among those people who believe that putting all your money on 4 or 5 guys is not a recipe for success when you get to the playoffs. And we've seen it. We've seen it. That how many years has Austin Matthews or Mitch Marner had great regular seasons, and they come to the playoffs and they're not remotely the same because the game changes. The Blue Jays, at least if things repeat what happened last year, will have a really strong pitching staff. I don't know if they can score any runs, but they're going to have a strong pitching staff if they don't get injuries, because they had none last year.
But they haven't done anything.
No, they haven't.
We had this Ross Atkins the other day doing a press conference, and he was talking about how good he feels about the team, but he hasn't done Kiner Falefa, a utility backup infielder. We still don't have a third baseman.
Oh, no.
Whoa. I mean,
they're going to have to win all their games 2-1. And no, but you said who's got the better chance?
All right, fair.
The Blue Jays have, I think, the better chance. I'm not saying they're winning, because at least if things hold, they have solid starting pitching. The problem you're going to have is there's a lot of other teams in baseball which does not have a salary cap, which, I'm sorry, like the Dodgers, it's hard to imagine them not winning. Can you? I mean, every year for the Dodgers, they don't win a Super Bowl, a World Series for the next few years, is a colossal failure.
Yes,
it's only one team wins. I heard people saying with the Bills, Josh Allen, well, only one team is happy at the end of the year. True, and so you say, well, there's lots of teams could win. Not everyone's going to. If you're the Dodgers, the money you're spending, you have to win every year now. But and they will probably win more often than not. The Jays, the competition is so stiff for the Jays. And if you can't score runs, they had the greatest offense probably we've ever seen in Toronto in 2015,
yes,
and a decent starting pitching group, and they couldn't win. That's scoring 1 million runs. My money of the 4 teams in that list that I put down there is still on the Ticats. The Ticats will win a championship. And not just because of statistical odds.
Mm-hmm.
I think that it's going to be easier in a 9-team league. And yes, the odds are better, but it doesn't take as much to tweak a CFL team, it seems. Mm-hmm. And make it pivot and become a really solid team.
And is it fair to say in the CFL, you don't have to have a great regular season to win?
Yeah, absolutely you don't.
Right?
Absolutely you don't. You can. This has always been a bugaboo of mine. I know some people say, oh, it's the best thing about the CFL. When they say the season doesn't start till Labor Day. Mm-hmm. I think that's a horrible advertising campaign for the league.
It totally is.
It's a horrible. Why am I going to a game?
And we use that excuse all the time.
Yeah, but why am I going to a game in July then if this game doesn't matter? You could literally start 0-9 and win the Grey Cup.
Yep.
Now, again, there is a charm in that league. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, if the Ticats only go 10-8, they could still win the Grey Cup. You just got to get hot at the right time.
For sure, especially with the divisional setup. And I know this will, if Uncle Milty is watching, he's going to go bonkers, because you got people like Dwayne Ford, myself. It's a 9-team league.
100%.
Stack them 1-9, whatever. I get the East-West thing. It was part of the foundation of the Canadian Football League. But come on, I think leagues need to adjust. They need to pivot, if I could use that word, and adjust.
Bubba, there was a time. I know we got to run here. There was a time. Although it's a podcast, we could do this for 12 hours. Right? do a Howard Stern. There was a time when the only things that connected the east and west of this country was the railway and the CBC. Those days are gone. Vancouver is theoretically as close to us now as Burlington is, because of the internet and because of everything else. I don't believe now, people will disagree. I don't ever hear anybody, when the CFL is into their playoffs and the Ticats lose, I don't hear anyone around here saying, oh man, I got to cheer for the East. Nobody, it's not that East-West thing. Maybe in the West they care about that, but no one around here gives a whoop. So to me, yeah.
Were you cheering for the Argos? No.
Was anybody around here cheering for the Argos? So I'm with you. Throw them all into
best
one.
On best.
And then the regular season doesn't start till Labor Day. That changes, because now those games early on, if the West all of a sudden is running away with those early games against the East, you can't just rely on your inter-conference games late in the season. You could be either buried or you're not getting a home game just because you happen to be the best in a weaker conference. I'm all for that. But I'm also all for getting rid of the rouge. So, CFL players, CFL fans lose their minds at certain things. Those two are two of them.
Oh, CFL Ticat fans, get ready. This is the guy that's going to be writing about the Canadian Football League and stirring the pot, and you're going to be great doing it. I know you do. Everything you've touched has turned to gold in terms of what you've done on radio and really your first appearance on the Sportsline podcast. I'm looking forward to the next time there, Scott.
Absolutely. Tomorrow? Oh, it's Saturday.
It's Saturday. They don't pay. Thanks for joining us,
Thank
Scott.
you.
Folks, hey, we love talking sports from a local, provincial, and national perspective. If you know of an athlete, team, or event to promote, the Sportsline podcast wants you. Now, contact me on many of CHCH's local or social media platforms, and we'll certainly set something up. One last request, please hit that thumbs up, like, and subscribe button. For the wonderful minds and hands that make this podcast possible, thank you for joining us, and hey, we'll see you next week.